Uh, Welcome to the third week of the live events. Today, we're talking about the physical area of the 7 fitness areas. Now, the 7 fitness areas is my framework that I use to stay on track when I'm working with a client or when creating change. So the idea is that whenever you go after a new quest, you have to reset your identity. Consider that our conditioning was greatly formed from age 0 to 7, in the teens, and then solidified with the prefrontal cortex formation in the 20s. I like to say kind of operationalized our conditioning for the model of the world. Well, what we did, especially for people over 50, what we were conditioned to do in our teens and our 0 to 7 is vastly different than what we're doing today. So we have to reset. And in life expansion after 50, that's a major reset, because you consider that you basically at 50 years old, you had about 30 years in your adult life. It's very easy for people to live from 50 to 80. And as a matter of fact, the life expectancy is more like early 90s, because it doesn't reset with age. So as you get older, it's still using the tables from people who were born in 1965 or 1975, whatever. And what we're doing is footwork drills, and the connection with footwork drills and anti-aging. So I like to think of it as these footwork drills create a situation where we're essentially getting sort of an anti-aging serum. And you can go back and look at the prior weeks where I go more in depth. I'm not going to talk about it a lot today, but the short version is that there's a strong benefit in neurotransmitter and mitochondria. Mitochondria, think of this as mitochondria like mini organs inside the cells. And they make the cells function and perform. And we want that, obviously, as we get older, we want to keep replenishing that and keep that strong. And it helps with the neurotransmitter, and specifically the dopamine, serotonin, glutamate, and acetylcholine. Dopamine, that's the habit formation, so it gets us to build the habits that we want to have, or it enables that. And the serotonin is the feel-good neurotransmitter. So if you're feeling sad or down, or you wish you had that zip that you'd had before, that serotonin, boosting that serotonin is going to help with that. And then the glutamate is from the central nervous system, it sends the signal to the neural pathway, and then the acetylcholine from the neural pathway to the muscle junction. So these are very, very important in terms of mobility and being able to do the things that we want. I would argue that after 60 or 70, what we think is a loss of strength is partially loss of muscle strength, but the bigger factor is a loss in the signal coming from through the neural pathway. If the sending part is weak, the glutamate, and the receiving part is weak, or the transition part is weak, the transfer part is weak, the acetylcholine, and the neural pathway is weak. So how's the neural pathway weak? Neural pathways, they activate with synapses. So you have neurons that are in a string of the neural pathway. And let's say it takes me 1,000 neural pathways to make a step. We've got 100 billion neurons, so that's not out of the question, right? It takes me 1,000 neural pathways to make a step. Those neural pathways have synapses in them. The synapses connecting the neurons. What happens is when we're not using that neural pathway, it goes, for lack of a better term, dormant. And what we want to do is activate those neural pathways. So if you think about it from a standpoint of a exercise, I'm going to combine a few concepts here. A weightlifter, they have plateaus. I used to think of that as purely just the muscle needing a break or needing to rest or whatever. But it turns out that the 100 billion neurons is going to set up leverage points and all that. And this is a layman's way of saying it, to make the activity that we're doing status quo. This is why it's hard in the beginning and then it gets easy. We may think that the muscles are getting stronger, but a lot of it is the neural pathways. So after 50, it starts to show up that the neural pathways are just not firing the way that they used to. And what I'm doing out here, the footwork drills, it drives the central nervous system to create more neurotransmitter to activate new neural pathways. So there's 7 factors that are applied. And every time I come out, if you look at my other videos, there's usually a different setup. Some of the setups, like this first one here, the first line, I do each week because I like it for warm up, and obviously it's for safety reasons. I want to warm up properly. And then there's another one that I use regularly. I'll probably use it today, where I for sprinting, because the objective here, one of my tests is that after 8 weeks of this, I'm going to attempt to sprint and beat the time that I had 5 years ago. And this is just a soft way of looking at, is there a result from there? I'm also doing some other things. More on that later. We'll talk next week. I'll get a little bit more involved in the daily routine that I'm doing to drive neurotransmitter as well. So the 7 factors: novelty, that's why I set up a different course and try different things with it. Intention, so whenever I'm doing a course, I'm always having some intention. And because it's a new course, there's usually some precision involved, which is the 3rd factor. So intention and then precision, and I'm intending to hit the marks that I'm wanting to hit, or the spaces. And then there's balance. Balance comes into play. I'll do on the cone exercise, and that one I did do last week because I'm still struggling with it. But each week it gets better, because that's the whole point. The central nervous system gets the cue that more demands are coming. It floods the system with neurotransmitter, which is my objective. And that neurotransmitter shows up in activated neural pathways. And you'll see, if you compare this week with last week, you'll see a big difference. And also hopping on one foot. 2 weeks ago, I couldn't make the whole ladder hopping on one foot. Now I can. Again, without working on it in between, it's just because the body's flooding with neurotransmitter. And then there's the 4th one. The 5th one would be progression. We have to add progression. So the way I add progression is either more speed, I move the cones further apart, I do something different. I'm adding weight. So this vest is 4 pounds, and I have 2 pounds in the back, 1 pound each. I can add up to 4 more pounds, 1 pound increments. And that's the idea, is to add 1 pound per week, assuming I can make my course. I'm going to set up a course at the end of today that I have to run inside of 40 to 45 seconds. And that course is my way of testing whether or not I can move to add that next weight. So here's the first thing I'm going to do, is the warm up. So this basic warm up, I start off going slow. Now remember, I have 6 pounds in my vest, and I'm not trying to get hurt out here. I'm just trying to tell the central nervous system that more demands are coming. Think of it like a hunter-gatherer. As they get into new areas, their bodies have to, just the same way they acclimate to weather, they may have to acclimate to, maybe there's more hills, or maybe they have to do more swimming, anything, right? And so it's sort of like that. What I'm doing is I'm telling my nervous system that more demands are coming. So that was just a basic step. Now I'm going to add a little bit more speed to it and pushing off from the outside foot. Taking a little bit of a further step out there to get the bounding. I left off explosiveness. I stopped midway or partway through. So I said novelty, intention, precision, balance, progression, explosiveness, and then struggle. Struggle on the edge of ability. So that foot coming off the outside is my explosiveness at a low level. And then I'll start increasing it. And then we have the progression. Is not really showing up here, but you'll see that I add more complexity to it. So now what I'm going to do is, and this is still warm up, so now the progression, some of it came from speed, but now I'm going to skip 2 spaces or skip to the next space. And I'm going to continue to put my foot further outside. So from here, a little bit much with, so that's it. And that's struggle on the edge of ability. So it's okay, because, yeah, it's too far out. I can't get it from that far out. From here is good, because what I want to do is work up to skipping 2 spaces. So this is sort of an interim step to skipping 2 spaces. Maybe I should put a cone out there so I have an idea of how far I'm stepping off to make it consistent. So you can see I'm getting out of breath. Later today, I'll talk about the physical area. Breath is a big part of it. Breath cleanses the blood. Breathing cleanses the blood. Movement is moving my lymphatic fluid. I'll touch on that. I have to keep reminding myself that this is not typical exercise. I'm not out here trying to do the same kind of exercises that somebody might be doing during speed work. What I'm doing is literally working to flood the system with neurotransmitters. So that's a good warm-up. Now I might do, this gets me going backwards and forwards. These are close together for that exercise. I'll show you what I mean. These are spaced a little bit further apart. You can't tell because of the angle, but you can see how the flow is better. And that's not what these will be used for. They'll be used for a different exercise. I'm breathing hard. That's good because 70% of the body toxins, from what I understand, come out through the breath. So the harder I'm breathing, the cleaner I'm going to be. Fewer toxins. Fewer toxins means the body doesn't have to work so hard to get the blood to the pH balance of about 7.35, 7.45. The body doesn't have to work so hard. That means less oxidative waste and less inflammation. If I have less oxidative waste and less inflammation, then the body's normal mechanisms to reduce inflammation and get rid of oxidative waste can be used for other things, or getting rid of deeper waste or other waste. In other words, think of it like alkaline and acid. Alkaline neutralizes acid. The body's creating alkaline to process the toxins. If I don't have as many toxins to process, that gives more alkaline available, makes more alkaline available to process toxins from deeper in the system. We have toxins in our fat. Toxins are pulled away from the organs for safety, and those toxins need a high enough alkaline environment in order to process. So that's the warm-up drill. And I'll do this one here. What? Again, it's tight for this, but it's good for moving the feet. Now, I'm trying to stay at 80% here, not going to 100% because I need that for the drills. And there's always one thing I laugh about. So suppose all this is wrong. I mean, there's a lot of research. You can Google all these things. Google AMPK. That's the energy manager. It helps manage energy. So think metabolism. I'm expecting to see some benefits from insulin resistance. Mitochondria, like I said, that's the mini organs inside the cells. It's to help with cell function. And of course, you have your neurotransmitters, and then BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. What's powerful about that one, it actually helps build new neurons. So imagine that. So while we're aging, we can still build more neurons, and it improves the neural pathway function. So if you think about the brain being efficient and it stops providing synapses for the neural pathways, once we start doing this kind of work, those neural pathways have to activate. The BDNF is going to help. Now, I'm not saying this is going to reverse aging, but it can certainly slow that decline line down. My belief is that whereas the decline line typically starts around the 40s, we can extend it out. The research already says we can extend it out to 75, but we already see research that says the line is extended out to 75. I believe that once the scientists start experimenting with this or start publishing their results, we'll see that you can push this line out past 90. It just depends on how much you're willing to work. So somebody might say, well, wait a minute, that's a lot of work. Yeah, but so is being frail at 90. I don't want to be frail at 90. Now, I may not have the same energy levels as I did in my 30s, but just think about this. Imagine living a life at 90 and you don't have to worry about falling down, because if you fall down, you can just get right back up because you're doing different drills. There are a number of people who die in older age because they've fallen and they couldn't get up. That's my story. I'm sticking to it. Now, this is a new exercise. I tried, what I do is I go out to YouTube and I look for exercises and then come out and try them. And the ones I like, I make modifications. So this one is a good one because it includes a nice long stretch of going backwards. So I got to go backwards. And then I'm going to do this. And once I start the exercise, and then I go backwards. Once I start the exercise, I'll start alternating and going foot in front and then foot in back. And then I'm doing this because I have to, my high knees are terrible. My high knees are terrible, so I've got to work on them. And that's kind of what I do. I find an exercise where I'm struggling, and then I'll do variations and add new ones in. Here we go. Back. Skip. Skip. Shuffle. 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 Back. Shuffle. 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 Side step. High knees. High knees I got to work on. And right now I'm going a little bit awkward because I'm trying to get myself to lift my knees up more. I also have a hip flexor issue going on, which is all part of the deal. All right. So that was, now I'll go back the other way. I'll start from this side. Normally, if you watch track and field guys doing this, what you'll notice is they do take a longer time between recovery, and certainly longer than I'm going. But because I'm doing it live, I want to keep the thing moving along. And it is what it is. Now, and that way I'll be going back the other way on the ladder and that way on the cones. All right. So here's front foot, front side crossover. Front side crossover. Switch it up a little bit. So I switched it up because I was definitely getting gassed. So the switch up means fewer hops or fewer steps in the ladder. I still have to save some more energy to be able to do the run that I want. What I'll probably do is talk a bit in the physical area and then do the run because I'm gonna need to recover. I've been talking for a good portion of the 25 minutes. Normally that would be used for recovery. So this one I couldn't do last week without help from my other foot, the up foot. Now I should be able to. There you go. And I have to get better for the progression part to demonstrate that. I'm going to use the other foot that's up, not to push off, but just for balance. Sort of a comfort foot, a comfort act. So I can go for the exercise. So here we go. Whoop. So it's just going to be on the toes if I need it. There you go. And this ankle has an injury, so it's a little weaker for now, but it'll, again, I'm activating neural pathways, so it will get there. And I'll keep doing that exercise until I can do it without touching the cones, and then I'll start moving the cones closer together. Now, I'm going to introduce one running exercise. And then we'll talk about the physical area. Now, I've been sprinting on 1 day a week on Monday. So I'm trying different things, either not sprinting on Saturday. I shouldn't say sprinting because I don't sprint. Fast runs or running drills on Saturday. I've tried it without running drills on Saturday. I've tried it with running drills on Saturday. I'm also nursing the hip flexor, and that comes into play in sprints. And I'm actually considering taking 2 weeks off from sprinting. I'll see how I feel this Monday. And I'm going to try some running drills today, as you'll see. Now, I don't time myself on these. It's really just how I feel. But once a week, I'm going to time myself to do that run. I'll demonstrate it in a bit here. So start off backwards. I'm going to do a couple of reps. So the idea here is just starting off. Eventually, when I take the weighted vest off, I should be able to get a little bit more explosiveness. So again, the hard breathing is great. I shouldn't really be going to failure. That's not the point here. We're not trying to go to failure because the objective is building neurotransmitter, flooding the body with neurotransmitter. Because the more neurotransmitter I have, there's a correlation between produced neurotransmitter and improved mitochondria. That gets into the cell health. So there we go. I'll do one more over there. So I would say that even having to stop is helping with the explosiveness and the progression. All right, so this next exercise I'm going to do is kind of a crazy drill. I'm going to set 5 cones up at the top of this little hill. I'll move the cameras. And then the idea is take a cone from the top of the hill, bring it back down, place it down, go up and get another cone, bring it down. And because it's 10 yards and 5 cones, week to week, and it's on the same hill, week to week, it should be the same thing. That's why I time myself and hit between 40 and 42. And I should see improvement, but the point is I'm adding a pound every week. So even if there's no improvement in the time, I know I'm making it harder. 7 fitness areas. 7 fitness areas is the framework I used. So once a person goes through the transformation series, they can use the 7 fitness areas to keep doing laps. My argument is that every time you do a new quest, you have to a degree, reset your identity. In resetting the identity, we're able to get rid of some of the old habits that we don't need. See, so much of what we do is done by habit. 95% of everything we do is done by habit. And use the 7 fitness areas to replace those habits, to reset those habits. Last 2 weeks, I talked about the mental area. The mental area is all about the cognitive piece. And we go through getting control of the stimulus response cycle. That's last week and the week before. The 2 weeks ago, I talked about a pre-stimulus phase and the beliefs, neuroplasticity, priming, and mindset, and how we have to manage that and physiology so that we have a pre-stimulus phase going into the stimulus. And from a mental state of being and a physiological state of being, we're in our best position to be able to perform well. You see, we have about 33,000 stimulus response cycles a day. Now, if you look it up, it'll say 33,000 decisions a day on average. And I would argue that most of those are stimulus response cycles, as opposed to all of them being conscious decisions. It's obviously a mix. And if 95% of what we do is done by habit, then I could further surmise that 1,500 of those stimulus response cycles are conscious. So what we did last week was talk about the stimulus response cycle to gain control over it. The powerful present moment is what this is about. And that's what we're going to get to next week or the week after when we talk about the spiritual area. The powerful present moment is where we get control of our destiny because we're not being hijacked. Now, it doesn't mean we're going to do 100% of our lives conscious. I don't want that. 85% by habit is fine with me. If 95% is what the world is doing, I'm fine at 85%. That I'm tripling the amount of conscious action, the amount of powerful present moments I'm in charge of. And that can only help. So the physical area, I'm going to give you 5 factors that I consider important. Now, if you catch me in 2 years, they may change. And right now, the breathing, which is a very important one, but I save it for the spiritual area because it has a bigger impact there. I'll only touch on it today. The 5 factors I want to look at. One is we need clean and healthy, and any of this is like motherhood and apple pie. I mean, if you disagree with this, then, you know, we probably won't agree on much. You want clean and healthy blood. You want hydration. You want healthy cells. You want good nutrition, and you want good physiology, good posture that serves you, not that gets in your way. Now, again, the context is after life expectancy after 50. I recognize some people in the audience may be 20 or 30, so this may not resonate. But if you ever talk to somebody who's a little older, they'll tell you, yeah, in the 40s, I started needing more recovery. In the 50s, I started losing some flexibility, maybe some agility, maybe slowing down a little bit. In the 60s, I lost strength. And in the 70s, we lose mobility. So these footwork drills turn that around. Number one, I'm improving my mobility. At 70, I'm not mad at myself for tripping over a couple of cones here and there. And like I said, if I fall down, I know I can get back up. And those stumbles and trips, I don't have them. They don't happen. If I misstep something, if I step off a step wrong, it doesn't happen. So I'm fine with that. Now, the context is in our 20s and 30s, we naturally did this because our muscles were building. We're going to the gym, we're doing exercise. The signals were strong enough that the muscles were doing the work, and we progressed in the gym, but that's a strong signal and a strong muscle. The muscles don't drop off as fast as people think. People might think the muscles drop off like this at 70 in terms of getting weaker. The muscles are still pretty strong. And if you've ever seen some old guys working out in the gym or doing some different exercises, you can see there's some strength there. What happens is the neurotransmitter signal drops off because there's less and less and less neurotransmitter available, less synapses to connect neural pathways, and so the signals get weak. And what we're doing with the footwork drills is we're building up the signal. The signal, what's nice about it, if a muscle atrophies, part of that is the muscle, part of that is the neurotransmitter. The synaptogenesis is the process like pruning neural pathways. If you have a muscle that atrophies, part of that is the muscle, but part of it is the lack of neurotransmitter. The neurotransmitter reactivates in minutes, hours, and days. It depends on what you're doing and how long it's been dormant, but you can get the neural pathways to activate very quickly. So the physical area is important. And by the way, when you look at cognitive processing and you consider that most people mistake the associations from the energy running through the neural pathways, they mistake that as thinking. It's not thinking in the way that I can think about the unrelated and come up with complex thoughts and connect them in different ways and see the relationships. If that's thinking, that's not what's going on in the neural pathways. What's going on in the neural pathways is more like ChatGPT. It's just associations. You're asking a prompt, you give it a stimulus, and it fires off a set of associations. And because the base level thought in its most basic form is energy, and what's going through the neural pathways is energy. And a neuroscientist might explain it differently. But because they're both energy, you can see why it's easy to mistake the neural pathway associations with thought. All that was to say that a large portion of our cognitive processing is actually physiological. Once you start seeing the world through that lens, it changes things. Because number one, you can spot when somebody's being triggered. You can spot when you yourself are being triggered. And if a person is being triggered, you recognize you can't reason with them. You just let it go. You come back the next day. You just know there's one area you don't step on anymore unless you want to trigger them. Seeing when people are triggered, gives you so much power over the present moment to not engage where you don't need to be engaging. Now, on the physical area, so the blood, clean and healthy blood. Two things. One is we have to move because the lymphatic fluid cleans our blood. And the lymphatic fluid does not have a pump to move it. It gets moved by us moving. So without the lymphatic fluid moving, we're not clearing the toxins as much as we can, which means we have organs sitting in toxins. We've got the body trying to rid the blood of toxins so it can get to that 7.35, 7.45 alkaline acid balance. And that's creating inflammation and oxidative waste, which means more toxins. So we want to move and get the lymphatic fluid moving. And you can start that just with physiology, going up and down the stairs, bouncing, just stepping. My morning routine includes bouncing on a Bosu ball. Now, I could do more than that. I could do jumping jacks. Bouncing on the Bosu ball is enough. With these drills, I ride a bicycle, so I used to do 3 days a week, but now with these drills, I'm doing these 3 days a week, so the bike's down to one day a week. But between sprinting and biking and these drills, I'm moving my lymphatic fluid, no question about it. I'm not concerned. The second thing on the blood is we need hydration. So everybody knows that you need blood, right? I have to say, you can live seconds without blood, minutes without oxygen, days without water, weeks without food, and months or years without exercise. So it's kind of standard. It's in our face what's important and the priority. But here's the thing. If you dehydrated, your blood is thick. If you ever gone to give blood, you may have heard the phlebotomist say something like, oh, wow, you're really dehydrated. It's because the blood flows slowly when you're dehydrated. If the blood is flowing slowly and we need blood, that should tell you that your body's not getting the blood and the nutrients and the oxygen from the blood that it needs to perform. So we want to hydrate. And trainers will tell you 4 liters a day. I know there's stuff out there that says an ounce for every pound, I think it is. But when I talk to trainers, they're more in the 4 quarts a day. So what I do is I get up and I spend the first 5 minutes of the day, before I do anything, coffee or anything, I just drink a liter of water and I do 5 minutes of slow breathing. 10 counts in, 10 counts out. So basically 3 breaths per cycle. I do that for 5 minutes in the morning. And it's not meditation, but I'm clearing my brain. I'm letting the thoughts just flow through and I'm thinking about my vision. So it's lining up, helping me organize and make sure I get the things done in the day that I need to get them done. Sometimes I'll go 10 minutes. So that breathing is cleaning the blood. The hydration is making sure the blood gets to where it's supposed to go. And the movement is cleaning the blood with the lymphatic fluid. The second thing I said is that we need hydration. And that's the one I just talked about. So we've got to be able to keep the blood hydrated so that it gets to the body. Think about this. Our basal metabolism, our resting metabolism is about 80% of our day's metabolism. So we don't get that much benefit from the exercise. 80% is just to exist. The brain is a quarter of that. So the brain is a quarter or 20% of our day's resting metabolism. The brain is using that. And the brain needs nutrients, and the brain is going to get its nutrients. And if the blood is thick, the brain is having to work harder to get the nutrients. I'm not going to say it right. It doesn't really leach from the organs, but the brain can deprive the other organs of nutrients and oxygen to make sure it gets what it needs, because the brain is the one that's controlling all of that stuff. So it's going to take care of itself. So hydration helps that. And the thing about it, you won't notice the difference. But if you go give blood and you watch on a day that you're hydrated or a day that you're not, you can see the difference. Or talk to a phlebotomist and they'll tell you, yes, I spot it right away. They can tell. So you don't notice it the way that, you know, you can live seconds without blood, minutes without oxygen, days without water. So you don't notice it right away, but that doesn't mean it's not taking its toll. You start doing that in the morning, you'll find your days get better. As a matter of fact, when I first started doing this, that morning fog, sometimes when you get up, you feel like I want to get a cup of coffee. By the time you finish that quart of water, the liter of water, you don't need the coffee. I'm not saying don't drink it. The next one is the cell health. So I already talked about mitochondria. Mitochondria we're cells, that's what we are, and we need the cells functioning. So mitochondria is like the organs, the mini organ that's inside the cell that makes the cell function. It's like the power center of the cell. I'm not going to go down too far on that road, but if sprinting helps, that's how I got into these foot drills, by the way. Sprinting is known to help with building and improving mitochondria. Footwork drills do the same thing that sprinting does. The big difference is that sprinting requires a 1 week recovery, roughly, which is why I'm thinking about taking off 2 weeks from sprinting, versus the footwork drills. I can literally do them every single day if I'm not pushing myself too hard. That's why I've got to watch the recovery cycles. So the footwork drills and the sprinting, that's going to help with the mitochondria. But here's the other point I want to make about the cells. We need to watch our stress. And we all know this, but I like to connect the dots. Life is fractal. So a lot of the things that happen at the cellular level happen at the body level, or things behaviors we have as humans, you can see some of those similarities at the cells. What we know about cells is that when there's toxicity inside, so remember, our internal system is the cell's external system. And when there's toxicity in our internal system, the cells go into protective mode. When the cell goes into, or I should say when the cell is threatened, right, then the toxicity would be a threat. When the cell goes into protective mode, it can't go after nutrients. It's like a switch. It's either going after nutrients or it's going into protective mode. Letting yourself get stressed out unnecessarily, you are creating toxicity in your body. You know you have the cortisol, you know you get the inflammation, you know you get the adrenaline going on, and all of that is creating this toxicity. If you've ever been really scared and you can feel it in your system, it takes hours sometimes for that to all subside. Prevention is the way you can stop it. And I guess into last week's deal on the powerful present moment. So we have less stress. We're not getting triggered. We're modulating our emotions. It's very, very important, because if you have toxicity in your system, your cells aren't picking up the nutrients that they need to pick up, and the food you're eating is getting basically wasted, in one way of thinking about it. On the other hand, if you can cut out the stress, and you do that with prevention, and you do it by getting control of your present moment, which is why I talk so much about the mental area and the stimulus response cycles, because that's where the stress happens. If you let the body do what it's going to do, that stress is what you get. And then we have the nutrients. Just eat clean. You know the thing, less processed foods, green leafy vegetables. I like a high alkaline diet. Now, the doctors will tell you that some doctors will tell you that a high alkaline diet doesn't really make a difference. And I think that's coming from the fact that the blood is going to get to that right pH balance of 7.35, 7.45. It's going to get there no matter what. And so if you have a high alkaline diet, it doesn't change the blood's 7.35 to 7.45. The blood is going to get there. But if it's working too hard, it's going to have more oxidative waste and more inflammation. If you have a high alkaline diet, and again, this is not about getting healthy. This is about optimizing and performing better. So I don't want to get tripped up over, practicing medicine. That's not about that at all. We're talking about how to have more fitness in the 7 areas of your life. With the high alkaline diet, I'm processing more toxins before the body has to do it. And if I'm taking in higher alkaline food, I'm taking in less toxic food. It's just math. And having a high alkaline diet, green leafy vegetables, a green drink, the superfoods, things like that, antioxidants. By doing that, my body theoretically would have to work less to get the blood to that 7.35 or 7.45. And then the last one is physiology. So we can actually create fight or flight without physiology. And a lot of people don't realize this. But being in a depressed state, you know that you can get yourself depressed just by slumping over. Posture, if you can stand up, you can actually feel more courageous by standing with the courageous posture. One thing I'll just point out, it happened to me in the 90s, because in the 90s I was using a PDA. This is way before the internet was out, but people weren't using the internet. But I used to have these electronic devices, Scion, if anybody knows that name, S-I-O-N, and it was followed by the BlackBerry. But it never did get to the wireless part. But I used to do all my planning. I had spreadsheets on there. I had note takers on there. I was very fast at typing with my thumbs. And my head was down like this a lot. And turns out I ended up with aggravating a neck injury. And the physical therapist showed me how my ears were so far ahead of my shoulders. So I have to sound like this. And I'm telling you this because as I look around, I don't care where I am, if I look around, I see people walking around with their heads way in front. And it's because we're all like this. So I would just say, pay attention to your posture. Make sure you're standing tall, get your ears over your shoulders. You'll feel better, but also understand that physiology, the problems don't show up right away, right? We can, like I said, we can go months or years without exercise. So you're not going to see the problems from physiology right away. You're going to have to use some other markers to test this stuff. But just look up impact of physiology on stress response, and you'll start to make your own conclusions. Fairly straightforward and simple. Probably the least fun thing I'm going to do today. So two things happen. One is by filming, it forces some accountability on me because I really didn't want to come out and do this today. I did some heavy lifting last night, and you know, it's just we create context to be able to make these things happen. And then also for you to kind of see that I'm struggling. Everything's not easy. If it's going to get me more neurotransmitter, which gets me more anti-aging serum going to my body, why not? So I'm going to go up there, pick up a cone, and put it down here, and go back and get another cone. The reason I picked up the cones and replaced them is because the precision part, the novelty, different, intention, time, precision, placing the cone so it doesn't fall, balance, stopping and slowing down, picking up the cone. It's not balanced the way you would think about it, but it's definitely activating some footwork there. Progression, adding weight to do this each time, and also running uphill. Explosiveness, and then struggle. All of that is the 7 factors. I'm going to leave it there. Hopefully you got something out of this. Next week on Saturday, I don't have the time yet, but I'll post it a day or two early so you can see. I'll give you an update. It's been about 4 weeks. Today was focused on footwork drills. Next week I'm going to focus on the update and demonstrating that morning routine. And then we'll talk about the spiritual area, which is the next one. So mental, physical, spiritual. And then the following week we'll do emotional. The mental, physical, spiritual, emotional that we do laps around. And you get good at that, and you're going to be